So it's Gemini season. And guess what? Gemini seasons are not just for Geminis. This season is special for you as well. And I'm going to share with you why. My name is Peter Abundant, aka Dr. Abundant, PhD and ordained minister of metaphysical sciences, the study of spirituality. I am also the author of The Enlightened Shadow and Spiritual, Not Religious, both available on Amazon and Audible. So, Gemini season. Gemini. Many times when we think about these seasons, we only think about them as they relate to yourself, right? What of the zodiac are you? What is your season? And that's the only time most of us spend in really getting into the seasons. But we don't really think that the other seasons, the other zodiac signs actually pertain and relate or even influence or affect us. Now, this is the thing. I'm here to tell you that actually the seasons represent a point in your manifestation journey where you need to really focus on particular aspects of materialization of the things that you desire. So just like there is a yearly cycle, and throughout that yearly cycle, we witness things like the seasons, right? We witness spring, summer, fall, and winter, and then it repeats itself. Well, the same thing applies with you and the materialization of your desires. There is this particular pattern, a sequence that you are to recognize and then follow when it comes to you and materializing the thing that you desire. So, you want to think in terms of, okay, there is a cycle that happens, say, when it comes to nature, when it comes to the trees and vegetation and agriculture, right? There is a time where you begin to plant your seeds and those seeds begin to sprout and grow into trees eventually, right? And that is a particular example of how things materialize according to the seasons. This also applies to you. Now, it can apply to the entire year, or it can just be an example of the processes by which you actually materialize something. So you think of something more simple, like, let's say, materializing simply going to the store. There is a pattern that you take to go to the store, right? There is a pattern of thought where you initiate what it is that you want. There's a pattern of, within that pattern, there is then the next thing is thinking about other things that you want. There is gaining clarity as to what thing you want exactly and what things you don't want, right? Because you can't just go to the store and buy everything. So there's a process is what I'm trying to explain to you. And so though that is simply talking about a trip of going to the store and buying, say, groceries, that happens a couple of hours and is over. But there is a pattern by which you have to acknowledge in order to make sure that the materialization of that trip and gaining the groceries that you need is effective, right? Is executed. Same thing applies to the big goals. Say if you want to go to college or you want to build a career, you have to initiate, right? You have to start initiating. Think about Aries, right? The first zodiac of the calendar, the starter, the leader, right? So you want to really get into that initiating factor. Initiating isn't always about the clarity. Sometimes starting is more important than the clarity. So eventually, though, down the process of you moving along this journey, whatever it is, going to college, starting a business, even developing a relationship, working out, fitness, health, whatever it is, there is a process that happens here. So when we think about the zodiac, what I want you to do is think in terms of aligning yourself with the energies of the universe, the energies of this planet, and recognizing that there was a time, right, that this planet uses to create its, desires and create things accordingly to the, things that we witness, right? Nature. And so there is an energy that is existing right now. And that energy is one of Genesis, what we call Gemini season. Okay. And so really Gemini season is about recognizing the power of expression, the importance of clarity and alignment. So I'm going to break this down in a way so that way you get an understanding as to how the season of Gemini actually influences your manifestation. So when you are in the process of materializing a goal, which you should be, a desire, which you should be, why? Because that is your nature as a creator, you then can utilize the energy of this particular season and any other season that follows based on the nature of that season and really kind of piggyback, kind of ride the wave of that energy of that season to support you in materializing the thing that you desire. You see? So the first thing is let's get into when is Gemini? Gemini is from May 21st to June 20th. Okay. Gemini is an air sign. All right. Is ruled by Mercury. Mercury is the planet of communication, thought, and movement. Okay. The energetic theme of Gemini season is mental clarity, adaptability, of course, duality, and expression. So duality is a big one, right? When we think Gemini, we're thinking two parts, two halves, two individuals, two characters, personalities, right? This is going to be very important throughout this process of recognizing the significance of the two, the duality, okay? The manifestation focus in this season is really about clarity of thought, flexibility. It's also about expressive alignment. So let's get into the clarity of thought aspect of this season. In order for you to have clarity of thought, you have to really understand what is available to you. What are the options? Okay. And so as you are going down this journey of materializing something you want, the important thing about clarity is getting a understanding as to the options, the avenues, the paths that you can take to get that thing that you desire. Now, there are things in many ways can cause distraction, can interrupt, can deter you, right, from getting the thing that you want quickly or as quickly as possible, right? We're in this physical world, so speed is a factor, time is a factor. Now you have a multitude of options. You have to decide which options are the most effective for you, the best for you. That is what we talk about when we talk about clarity. Now, when we think about the duality that I mentioned before, sometimes you have two parts of yourself going back and forth, trying to make a decision. I can do this thing or I can do that thing. And it usually comes down to the two things that really stop you, right? That really hold you back. It's rare that it's like four things, right? You can easily come down to the two things that you can do to get the thing that you want. And that's when everything comes to a standstill, a halt. And so this represents the duality of Gemini. And so what I want you to understand, though, is this is a time along your manifestation of your desire where you have to make a decision between those two things. And that is going to actually support you in the materialization of the desire. Okay. So it's important to recognize the core energies of Gemini and how they support manifestation, right? So the thing with manifestation, the thing with clarity is to recognize, right? You have to be mentally, agile, right? You have to be able to be flexible, to be able to kind of move in a certain way that allows you to be present in the moment as you are taking action, as you are moving forward, without really questioning or worrying about the consequence or thinking about, well, what if I do this and this is the wrong choice? Understand in materialization, manifestation, spirituality, there really isn't a wrong choice. There is simply the choice. There is simply the decision you make. once you make that decision, you just have to continue moving forward, gain the insight and the wisdom that you need. And once you do that, continue to move forward without questioning, without doubting yourself, without building any insecurity or inadequacies. So you have to recognize that your ability to shift, say, like beliefs quickly and to reprogram your mindset is imperative. You have to be able to recognize what's working and what's not working. And then if you can't do that, you just simply have to decide and take action, because then you will figure out what's working and what's not working. You see? So it's a process of moving forward to get a result as quickly as possible. Once you get a result as quickly as possible, then you take that insight and that information to adjust. This is why I mentioned flexibility, agility. It's about being in the moment, taking a action or making a decision, and then reassessing based on the result that you got. Most times what you should be doing is when you take an action, when you make a decision, you should be looking at the results that bring you closer to the desire that you want. Okay. Instead of looking at how much further away you may be from the goal, which you're really not, but that's how our egos tend to think. Our egos tend to think, okay, I'm going to try this thing. And when I try the thing, there's two sides of you that's going on. The ego part, which is focusing on the negative and saying, oh, I wasn't good at it. Then you have your consciousness, which is saying, oh, we got this far. Oh, we got this insight. So let's go a little bit further. The ego is thinking, yo, I did not get that far. I'm not good at it. So maybe we should stop. Those represents the Gemini within you, the duality that's happening as you are materializing. So there's a thing though. If you focus on consciousness, taking action, assessing information, taking action, assessing information, taking action, assessing information, continuing to gather and bring that wisdom into a collection of accumulative knowledge that will eventually get you to a point of mastery, then there is no room for the ego to jump in and say, you know what, we're not good at it. You know what, we suck at this. You know what, we should probably stop. So the ability to have this mental agility is in fast action, quick decisions, assess quick decisions, assess quick decisions. Now, I know that can be hard for a lot of people because we don't want to make the bad decision. But the only real bad decision is not making a decision at all. The only real bad decision is indecisiveness, inaction, nothingness, quitting. Okay. So be mindful about that. Communication, affirmations, scripting, vocalizing your desires is what's going to support you in gaining power during the season. So you want to communicate, whether to yourself or whether to a significant other, maybe a partner, a best friend. Communicate that, your clarity is something that you're coming into, or, create affirmations that is going to help you with the clarity. But you really want to just get into a space where you are being clear as to what it is you desire ultimately. Like, what's the end result? What's the bottom line? And then as you continue to vocalize that, you'll be surprised that your subconscious, your mind will actually find the avenues, the solutions, the answers to that desire being materialized. So you just have to continue to put that out there or put it in within, but continue to communicate during the season with yourself about what you desire. Okay. And then that will reveal itself to you over the course of time as far as how and what you can do in this moment, in this season, to actually materialize that. Okay. Curiosity is very important during this time. Manifestation through things like exploration in trying new techniques, trying new methods, reading different kinds of books will maybe support you during this journey. Now, when I think about exploration, I'm still thinking about, things like agility, right? Mental agility. When you explore, you have no idea what you're experiencing or what you're going to experience, right? That is the definition of exploring. You're just going to learn, right, about a experience that you've never had before. And again, this is where that agility comes in, because you're walking into a space, into an arena, into a domain where you're new to it. And so when you do that, you have to adjust based on what you know in that moment, what you feel in that moment. And then you assess what the results are from that adjustment, from that action. And then you continue to basically maneuver in a way that essentially just gets you to a place of inner knowing and wisdom, right, of the situation. Okay. So curiosity is very important right now. You want to be curious about stepping into new realms, because most times when it comes to manifestation, we are desiring to materialize and manifest things that we had not experienced before. So the whole process is an exploration. It is an adventure. Okay. So recognize that along this journey. Duality, working with, say, both sides of yourself, meaning it can be related to your conscious and your subconscious energies, right? You can look at that as that duality of the two personalities or the two, aspects of yourself, sometimes at odds with one another. But when you are on the spiritual journey, you recognize that the objective is really to bring those two things into alignment. So while you have your conscious mind who can analyze and see that your current life and situation or your current relationship is not one that is fulfilling and supportive to you, or that doesn't align with who you know yourself to be, but yet your subconscious mind is continuing to perpetuate these habits, right? These habitual states of being, which is fortified and enforced by limiting beliefs and, limiting and old paradigms. So you're recognizing, okay, my conscious mind says, listen, this environment is hostile, it's not, fulfilling, I'm unhappy, but yet my subconscious mind is attached to the emotions, is attached to the mindset. I can't break free of the mindset. And those two things are going back and forth. So this is the time to gain more clarity, right? To go through, observe, analyze yourself, and communicate with yourself. Communicate with your subconscious mind. Make sure your subconscious mind understands, and you start to do the affirmations, do the scripting, the journaling, vocalizing out loud or internally to yourself to reprogram your subconscious mind. So that way, that half of you is in alignment with the other half, which is your conscious mind. You see, Gemini season is about setting an intention that is one of recognizing that clarity is key to that which you desire. You have to be clear. I mentioned nature before, and I'm thinking of a seed, right? A seed is completely clear as to what it is to grow. You may not know what that seed is, but once you plant that seed in the ground, once you water it, it will grow into whatever it is. An apple tree, right? Orange tree, a watermelon maybe. Like, you don't know, but it knows. And so the point of this season is to gain so much clarity that you absolutely, without a doubt, know what it is that you are going to create, right? What intention are you setting for yourself, And so the tricky thing with us is that we are infinite and we get to decide what it is that we want to create. The problem is, though, is that the battle, right? Oftentimes the misalignment between conscious mind and subconscious mind has us going back and forth, bouncing between this idea and that idea and this idea and that idea. So we're not getting really focused in on what it is you desire at this moment. So this is why it's hard for you to materialize certain things. For example, you want to materialize $1,000,000. Okay, well, one part of you wants that. The other part of you says that's not possible. We haven't done it before. I haven't seen anybody do it before. Therefore, I can't do it. So you're going back and forth between those things, meaning you're not focused and you're not clear as to one intention, one reality. Okay. And so what I want to share with you is things that's going to help you to get really clear about your intention when it comes to this season of Gemini, because this is the season of clarity. Journal prompting, right? So write, journal, you can just write what it is that you desire. Okay. You can't even write stories, you can even write, stories that, you create characters and you kind of are part of the story, you know, you want to focus on desires that require, like communication, clarity, decision making, learning, you want to do your affirmations in a way that allows you to get really, really clear about what you want. Try to keep your affirmations very, straight to the point rather than like vague and open, you know? So, for example, if you want to be fit, right? Say you want to get into running and you want to run a mile straight without stopping. Completely realistic, completely common, or an achievable goal, I should say. But you haven't ran in years, okay? You want to make sure your affirmation is something like, I am well and fit to run 1 mile, right? I am well and fit to run 1 mile, rather than something that is vague, like, I am fit, I am healthy, You want to make sure that the thing that you desire is included in the actual affirmation. Make sure that goal is in that affirmation. Set that clear intention for yourself right now. Okay. Embrace the curiosity of, what am I needing to do in order to achieve this goal? It is more of a fun experience, a fun experimentation. You're going to figure out what works for you. This is the beauty of it. You're going to gain clarity as to what you actually need to do or how you best achieve this goal. You see? So embrace curiosity instead of control, right? Instead of wanting to be rigid. Because a lot of times when we want to achieve something, we're so rigid in what we're seeing of other people who have achieved it that we think it needs to go exactly how it went for them. But let life show you the new path. Let yourself just simply focus on the next step along this path. Take one step at a time. And each step, again, mental agility. You are taking the step, you're feeling the surface, you're feeling the floor beneath you, you're feeling what you're feeling, right? Emotions, spiritual, insights, intuition, thoughts. And then you're assessing, and then you're taking the next step. So this is going to give you that clarity because eventually you're going to get to a point of really understanding the path you're on. Okay. Gemini, let's get into more rituals and techniques. Now, I am looking at my notes because there's a lot to this and I want to make sure I don't miss anything. I mentioned scripting before. Scripting, very important. Future self-journaling, very, very, very important and something that I practice. Once I discovered this for myself, I just practice and absolutely love it. Journaling was difficult for me at some point, but I recognize that if I'm communicating to a version of myself that I know myself to be and a version of myself that I'm coming into, then it actually is more exciting, is more connected. Like I feel more engaged with the process. So Gemini's communication gift is like writing things down. You know what I mean? So using this energy is very important. I always say writing things down is maybe the second. No, it's the second expression of manifestation. Speech is the first one, right? When I say expression, I mean physical expression. Speech is a physical thing. Writing things down is the second thing, right? So when you write things down, there's great power in that. So use Gemini's communication gift, because Geminis are good at communicating, is to write down your reality. Okay. Write it down so that way it's real to you. You can actually even touch the words, you can touch the paper. It's actually something that is tangible. Okay. That is what people mean when they say writing it down makes it real, because there's a power to writing it down. There's actually something physical you can touch. Now, speech, you can feel it when somebody speaks to you, especially if they're close to you. You can feel the vibration, but then it dissipates. Writing it down, though, on the other hand, is different, because you write it down and it stays there. As long as that paper still exists, that book still exists, you can still see the first phases of the physical manifestation of it. You see? Affirmation, activation, baby. Speak your intentions out loud, okay? Daily, in order for you to harness that Mercury power, right? Which is of Gemini, which is that power of communication. So be intentional. When you're in the mirror in the bathroom and you're brushing your teeth or you're just checking yourself out, state that affirmation. Make sure it's clear, precise, and present. Okay. Speaking of mirror work. That's one of my favorite things too. Practice self-talk to rewire your limiting beliefs in the mirror. One of the most powerful things you can do in the mirror, honestly, is look at yourself, but in your eyes. Just spend time looking in your own eyes. Spend a minute, 2 minutes. You will experience something different. You look at yourself in the mirror, but you're looking at your face. You're looking at your hair. You're looking at other things. Rarely do you look into your own eyes. So though this should be about really breaking limiting beliefs, I just want you to start there for now. Look in your own eyes for a minute, 2 minutes. Then say your affirmations. Okay. You realize that it's going to make a big shift in who you understand yourself to be. Okay. Now, when it comes to a great thing to do as far as breaking through in limiting beliefs, unconscious beliefs, shadow work is probably by far one of the greatest things that one can do, and it's really not complicated. It's really just acknowledging that there is a shadow there. Shadow represents the part of yourself that isn't exposed yet, that isn't exposed to the light. When you think about a shadow, you think about a projection of the self that isn't exposed to the light. And so you really want to simply just acknowledge that there is a part of you, right, that is quote unquote dark, that is, hasn't been exposed or seen. And just like us normal people, we like to be seen. And so what happens is the unconscious parts of you that isn't healed or hasn't been addressed will show itself in certain ways, certain attributes or symptoms or, triggers, things of that nature. So you have to recognize that, you want to understand that this process of materializing anything that you want, no matter what season it is really about recognizing that aspect of yourself is going to show itself. It's going to give you hints. It's going to remind you of some things because it wants to essentially, your consciousness wants you to acknowledge all of you, the whole and complete aspect of you. And we tend to only focus on particular aspects of ourselves. And we neglect other aspects, right? We only want to focus on the good aspects and then we want to neglect the bad. But the quote unquote bad aspects are also good. When you're on the spiritual journey, you see that, you recognize that, you begin to understand that. And so you start to embrace the shadow. You start to see that, okay, no, there are aspects here that I need to look at, that I need to be aware of, that I need to be conscious of. Because, there's great danger in manifesting from a place of confusion and contradiction, that again gets into the duality. People often materialize particular things. They put in the work, they put in the effort, and they materialize their quote unquote goal. But because they weren't truly clear about what it is that they desire, but wanted something very superficial because they've seen other people achieve it and have it and it sounds good, then they kind of pull themselves deeper into this space of depression, negativity, anger. So you want to make sure that you addressed anything that comes up along this journey. This is about communication. This season is about communication. So there are aspects of you that's trying to communicate to you. You should pay attention to it. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean that you suck at manifestation. It just simply means that you actually awakening. So when you start to experience certain feelings, experience certain things, that you've never experienced before or seen before, let them happen, address them, communicate with them, because it's communicating to you and it's doing so to help you, right? When you expose all aspects of yourself, the manifestation process becomes a lot more simpler, easier, and takes less effort, okay? Because there aren't any blocks anymore. You must address all those blocks. Those blocks are expressions of the shadow self, okay? Stillness is something that's very important. Stillness is something that actually can come from movement, and movement can actually come from stillness. Getting into that whole duality thing, one means the other. Okay. When you are still, then you create a space of clarity to move. You see? And it's very important that you recognize that, mastering focus is very important in a dual world, because that's what we're living in. We're living in a spiritual world and a physical world at the same time. And we are trying to maneuver and figure out how to function in that duality. It starts within. It starts with you mastering the duality within yourself, mastering that Gemini energy within yourself. All these signs are within us. We just happen to be born within a particular sign, right? Season. But ultimately, these are aspects of self. Just like we function in the world, the universe that has these seasons, we acknowledge that aspects of ourselves within the season to communicate with the nature of, the timing, the intention, the vibe, the energy, the theme of the season, you see. So now, again, is the time to get into clarity, communication, right? And mindset, So it's very important to really think about those things. Now, some good things to ask along this journey is, what truth am I not experiencing? Where am I split in belief and desire? Another question, what will happen if I let myself believe in what I am saying, right? That's the most powerful one. What will happen if I let myself believe in what I'm saying? Just imagine how powerful that statement is and how far you would get when you really contemplate that statement. Gemini season teaches that manifestation begins with mental clarity. Okay. Words create worlds. So be intentional with your thoughts and your speech. Be intentional with your movements, even if you are just simply focusing on the present moment at the time, the present movement at the time, be intentional about it. Make sure it's purposeful, and then simply adjust, take another step, right? Just keep moving forward. Don't feel like you have to stop. Okay. I know that when we think of clarity, we often think of stopping, but it's really about really observing. It's really about taking a moment to just pay attention. Okay. That is really what stillness is. Pay attention. Don't just willy-nilly go all over the place without any thought or mindfulness. Okay. This is going to allow you to really use this energy of Gemini in a very effective way toward the materialization of your thing, of your desire. So be mindful, be responsible, recognize that every season is your season. So just don't focus on the season that you were born in. Okay. Be in the moment. Focus on the season that you're living in right now. And trust me, when you recognize the power of these seasons, everything will reveal itself. Everything will be discovered in its, perfect time, perfect place. So that way you can actually come into understanding that you are perfect. Thank you so much. Feel free to go to drabundant.com, subscribe to my daily newsletter, and get access to this free ebook, The Power Within. Continue to join me on this journey. Peace and abundance always.